What's the role of the mentor in the end? Am I there to give you solutions? Because in my opinion, I'm not there to give you solutions. I'm there to raise some questions. Instead of the standard client comes, ask for something, we do it, deliver it, and that's it. At least try to challenge them. If we do all this, when we will actually end up coding? I was like, I don't know. You might not end up coding anytime soon. That could be the happy way of doing stuff. There are definitely faster, easier, and cheaper ways to test out things. At least you have to be very clear from the beginning what's your game, because the information that you are looking for is different, usually in retention. So you feed people into the product that you have, and it doesn't stick somehow. How strong of an evidence is that? It's true that in the beginning you try not to clutter it, but while you start building and adding stuff, it gets a bit cluttered. And also the customer type might change along the years. Oh, that's a tough question. But I was just thinking about this for some days, and I have to put it somewhere at one point, and I guess this might be that.
I'm listening.
All of them have too many ideas.
Greetings, fellow interneted people. My name is Andrei Doda, and today's guest is Daniel Andor. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Daniel, can you please share with us just a tiny bit? What's your story? What is your professional story?
Yeah, sure. My background is in product design. Like back then, it was UX UI. I worked with and in startups for quite some time. So I had a good overview, I would say, of how things are working in these kind of companies, and kind of followed the same passion since, but either by freelancing and working with startups or even scale ups or larger companies from time to time, or with the current setup in Durran, working with startups, mentoring startup founders in Romania or outside as well. I'm
Mhm.
currently mostly focusing on working with startups.
But you didn't start in this job, if I remember correctly. I don't think you even started working in product design at first.
Yeah, that's true. I started working at a small photography studio back then. After that, I switched to graphic design at again a small local company, and we've done like a lot of business cards and stickers and stuff like that. But it was kind of the path for my generation of getting into UX and branding, I would say, because that was what we had back then. We started with graphic design and working in these kind of industries mostly. Some people switched to branding and some people made it to UX. But given that there wasn't a lot of companies actually creating products, um, you either went, as I mentioned, with branding, either you went to work with outsourcing companies, and it was mostly UI. I would say back then it was less UX because it wasn't how it worked. But in a way, I was lucky to get into a company that were actually creating products, multiple products. So I worked with product people from, I don't know, almost 12 years now. Worked with developers, with product managers, with marketing people. So it was a good way of getting into actually doing product. It's not just like the theoretical knowledge that you get from books. It was actually hands-on, seeing how stuff happens. This is kind of how I started. I had different roles. I was assistant product manager, I
Mhm.
was UX designer, I was scrum master. And then I went to freelancing, and now with the studio. But it was kind of around products, I would say. All this almost 12, more than 12 years now.
So you do have quite a breadth of knowledge, and that is quite a journey in and of itself. But at what point did you realize that you would be interested to be working in the startup world?
It just happened. But even like back in the high school, I was
Mhm.
like when we learned, I don't know, C++ and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was more around like how we create this interface in a way, instead of like just writing down the code and inputting something in the code and outputting the result and make it somehow that that thing communicates with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you see it like in a hindsight, it kind of makes sense that I ended up in product design. But how I ended up in the startup world, it was in a way by chance because I got there to see how things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoyed it. So it's just started from that seed, and after it's just grow. I read a bunch of books and took courses and whatnot, but in a way, I ended up being around products, and I liked working with straight with the with products instead of like a third party, like how the outsourcing companies were set up back then.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because I felt that the impact is like you have access straight to the customer, so it's much easier to gather feedback, to show them something, to test, to ideate, even if we didn't really did something like this back then. So it was like theoretically this is how it's supposed to do, but this isn't how we work back then. But
Mm-hmm.
after that, it evolved, and you had the chance to actually do it, and you didn't have the constraint like that direct constraints as time and budget as with the outsourcing company. So when the client came, you have an allocated time frame, an allocated budget, so you have to fit into that. Uh, and it's a bit uh, I don't know, challenging, I would say, to get to the customer of your customer in order to actually do the job properly. So most of the times you end up just creating something that your customer approves, but it might not end up working in the end. This way, it was actually you can ship something to your customer, your direct customer, see if it works, if it doesn't work, try different approaches for the same thing, test, iterate on it. So it was in a way more direct feedback. And yeah, that's what I liked. I like to have try out stuff, see how it works, see if it works or not. And somehow that's the thing that I would say in a way it was also challenging and exciting. And after that, when I started with Durran, it was like what I would like to do is like work with startups because I like to work with these kind of early stage founders or founders in general to help them in a way create this product that summarizes their vision in a way or the other in order to change something in the world, because kind of that's what like what people say, that if you're a founder you probably have a vision or a mission and you want to change something in the world. So I was just there to in a way help them or try to help them. And this is why I also started being part of different startup programs as well in Romania and abroad, uh, because it was a good way to help, give back, collect feedback as well, try out different things. So yeah, it was a good exercise.
That is really, really, really cool. And that shows an evolution in terms of knowledge and an evolution in terms of wanting to also contribute to the startups that you do help. But you said, you mentioned at some point Durran, which you are the founder of. Can you maybe help us understand Durran? I noticed that the phrase that you use is startup advisor. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What does that even mean, and what is the role of a startup advisor?
As I mentioned, I'm in a way or the other mentoring and around founders for quite some time now. So you try to help and guide them. That's kind of like advisory in a way. The difference that we are trying to do, or at the moment, what I'm trying to do is instead of the standard client comes, ask for something, we do it, deliver it, and that's it, at least try to challenge that to see if actually holds water or not, if it works or it doesn't work, and why they think that that specific way of solving something might work or not. And it works with some, it doesn't work with others. So it's not like a one size fits all. And some founders like to be challenged, some founders don't like to be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same way as it happens in I would say even in different incubators or accelerators. You go there with a solution, those people are there to challenge your solution or to
Yep.
challenge your idea, and you try to go back up to the seed of the thing to see what problems you actually want to solve and why. That's what I also try to do, instead of like, hey, you come because you want to build whatever app with AI nowadays. Uh, it's more like, okay, but why you actually want to do this? What you want to do with this? What's
Mm-hmm.
your go-to-market strategy? How you will make money?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have
Mm-hmm.
something planned for that or not? And we try to map all this information. We use different mirror boards for that, and just put everything on paper and see what's actually really worked out, what's
Mm-hmm.
actually thought through, and it makes sense, and what's not. We lately started to do assumption mapping as well. So we track those assumptions to see if there are actually any kind of evidence for them, or it's just like made up. It's more like trying to challenge actually the founder, and trying to clear in a way and get an overview of how things are at this moment in order to move forward. In my opinion, you can't really create a proper solution for anything if you don't know the context and if you don't know the problem.
I think you made this point really, really well, and that's a thing to be aware of because the startup advisor is very different from just an outsourcing service. Uh, as a startup advisor, you don't only help with the work needed to be done, you don't just help with the product, you challenge the startup team and you offer them at least a question to look at the problem from a different perspective, if not quite a whole different paradigm.
What I like to say is, like, in the end, they are the entrepreneurs, they are
Mm-hmm.
the founders, so it's their call on if they act or not on this.
Mm-hmm.
Even if, like, there, I had this discussion with like startup mentors and startup program organizers as well, like, what's the role of the mentor in the end? Am I there to give you solutions? Because in my opinion, I'm not there to give you solutions. I'm
Exactly.
there to raise some questions, and I have to pinpoint some questions. I have to raise them. You have to have some kind of answer for it. Either it's something that you say it out loud, either it's something that you just bring it for yourself and think about it. Because otherwise, it's not like a franchise. At least in my opinion, a startup is not a franchise. I even told some, like, dude, if you want like a silver bullet or a franchise, go and just create a McDonald's. You just get the whole thing, and that's it. It's a franchise. If you want to do a startup, then you will mess up quite a lot of stuff, and the only silver bullet that you can read even in the books is that, one, there is no silver bullet, and the second one is that the whole thing is on how fast you can actually iterate and try out stuff. Unfortunately, some startups are stuck quite a long time in the same path or in the same solution, and they just waste. The easy way to say is that they waste time and money, but actually they waste opportunity as well, because in the same time they could do other stuff and try out other things, and they don't do that. So it's like a lot of implications of one decision to not try things out and just build, because that's what's happening a lot of times in Romania. If you check startups and founders, they have this urge to build stuff, but not necessarily to strategize and create the business plan and think about why we actually build this thing. It's like, hey, I have this idea, I built this product, and now what? And nothing. It's like nothing will happen most probably, because it's not just that you build a product.
Absolutely. It's obviously not about just the product, and it's obviously um, also even more relevant, may I dare I say, it's even more important to be connected to the user, consumer, to
Mhm.
whatever audience you are actually building that product for. But just one last thing regarding the startup advisor role. I do imagine there's no silver bullet on that, but I would imagine that given the need to iterate and not just you come in on a snapshot at a moment in time in a startup, I would just wonder how long does the startup advisor role, the integration of the startup advisor within a startup actually last? Is it like a 1 week process, a month process, a few months? And also, how are you regarded within a team? Do you come inside the team? Are you joining the team? Are you joining as part of a team? Are you still considered an outsourcing, or how is that? How does that happen?
I would say that it depends. Like I have clients that I just work with and we have a defined time budget in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but the approach is a bit different. So we don't start with, hey, I want to build this, whatever, and you build it. It's like let's say the one of the latest was they wanted to build an MVP and they had like they even sent over like a long document of this should be in the MVP and it was uh, also paired with a 1 hour video of what should be in there. And we just like, I just scanned through the whole stuff and I said, okay, we will just discuss all this through workshops. And we had like 2 weeks of workshops
Mm-hmm.
to define and basically redefine the MVP. And
Mm-hmm.
it ended up a bit different than what they thought about. But what was also nice is that once we had the MVP defined, we created a prototype, then we went, tested that prototype with their customers. We collected the feedback, we inputted that back to the team, and then we decide on what actually we build into the MVP and what won't be in the MVP and how it will look.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to think about it. That was like around a month of work with
Mm-hmm.
them. From time to time, I check in to see like how they are doing. They are in the implementation phase. They just launched the Android version of the product. Now they will launch the iOS version of the product. So with them, I kind of just check in and that's it. There are other ways to think about the same advisory role if you want. I have a team that I'm in a way a product advisor because we met through different incubators. So we ended up working together. It was more hands-on in the beginning, and now it's more like a passive work. When they have something regarding product or UX, they reach out
Mm-hmm.
and we discuss at that moment. And also right now, like these couple of months, I have around three. I have two active startups that I'm advising and mentoring on a weekly basis for around 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of a program that I'm also mentoring in. So that's actually weekly calls with them to see the progress, to see what they plan to do, help them on the blockers they have. So this is why it's really different. If you think about the financial part, it's usually in a way similar to an outsourcing setup,
Mm-hmm.
but how you deal with with the challenge is different. It's not just execution; it's
Yeah.
more like a different. I would say almost like a strategic approach of the same thing. You want to help them to see what they actually build and why, and if that makes sense or not.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you end up with like, look, this wouldn't work. I had a project where we built the whole thing, or at least we managed to get it to a point to show it to clients, and when we showed it to the clients, it didn't work. And that's it. Like I even told somebody, like, look, if you are an outsourcing company that like no, nowadays we don't have outsourcing companies because they rebranded everybody in product development, product whatever kind of companies. But in my opinion, as long as you have these milestones of checking and testing, and you can't can't assume that at one of those points the project might fail through, you're an outsourcing company in a way because you will push to deliver either way because that's when you will make the money
Yeah.
out. So you can't really test because some projects fell through at that stage and you don't want to fail through because otherwise
Yeah.
you won't make money. So yeah, it's a different approach of how we think about that. That comes with other stuff as well. So it's easier in a way. It's easier to make more money with development than with what I do
Mm-hmm.
because there are different ways to think about it. But it's usually easier to sell development than this, especially in the beginning.
You did give quite a few examples of your experience with startups and how it went so far. I would just wonder, given the examples that you just mentioned, from what I heard, you pretty much said that they are companies, they are startups before their Series A, before even
Mhm.
their seed round. At what stage do startups actually call you, and at what stage should they call you?
Oh, that's a very good question. I had a discussion this morning about this.
Huh.
Uh, the thing is that when they should call you is
Mm-hmm.
usually I would say once they figured out some basic stuff, like they have some customer interviews, they already have some knowledge.
Hmm.
Because if they reach out before that, I just usually point them back to look, there is a lot of free stuff that you can actually do. Here are some resources, go and do it. And after that, we can have a discussion. Because they wouldn't pay a lot of money for something like this. So it's much more like, hey, I had an idea, and kind of that's it. So they're not really invested in this yet.
Hmm.
Uh, and there are also startups, there are also different programs that can help them in a way. In Romania, from what I know, most of the programs are free, with some exceptions.
Yeah.
So these are quite a lot of options that you can take and don't necessarily invest money yet. Once you have something in a somewhat defined, I would say once you know about your problem good enough and you start to think about the solution, then that would be a good point to actually have a discussion at least and see what you could do next. Because most of the founders that I know, they start talking with developers and building, and that's it.
Hmm.
And that usually ends up with a very long cycle of developing product, putting it into the market, figuring out that it didn't work, and then going back to the drawing board and starting again, or changing the development team, stuff like this. And that's a very long process.
Hmm.
And there are definitely faster, easier, and cheaper ways to test out things. The difference is that people that I actually end up working with, they are a bit different. They usually have a product on the market, or they are the second product and they already know that something didn't work out with the first one. So they are people that, in a way or the other, went through the pain phase. I would say they already know that they would need help. Those are the people that I usually end up working.
I really, really like the way you put it. They went through the pain phase because, yeah, before you get actually invested and before you actually put your whole energy on the line into this thing, into whatever it is that you're building, there's a lot of time where you have to be not very good at what you're doing, and it will happen in any kind of professional setting that you will try to get into, especially in startups. So if you know that this is the case, it makes the most amount of sense to just go through it as fast as possible, go through it as consciously and intentionally as possible, just to get it out of the way, get the bad stuff out of the way, and then we can get invested and we've learned from our mistakes. And now we can actually be building something alongside you. But when people actually come to you, what is the problem that they come to you with? Do they already have ideas that they want to be implementing, or do they have too many ideas that they need help choosing from, or are they
All of
just
them have too
unstuck?
many ideas. Some come at straight at the beginning, like
Mm,
this was for defining the MVP part.
mhm,
But that's usually like, I don't know, once on a year or something. So there are a few clients at that stage that come. And even in that situation, they actually had a business up and running and they just wanted to create the digital part of the business in a way, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So they were using different products already. They just wanted to create an app that summarizes that whole thing and puts it in one place.
Mhm.
So they weren't like very, very early stage in that perspective.
Gotcha.
Most of the clients come to me when they already have a product on the market. They put something out there, and it, in a way or the other, it doesn't work, or it doesn't work as it's supposed to work.
Mhm.
So the user flows are not that okay. The retention rates are not that good. Uh, people don't use the product, and they end up reaching out to customer support a lot. This is why it's different. It's like they could start actually defining the product and testing all this stuff in the beginning, but they end up building the product and then they figure out it's not working, or it's not working as it's supposed to work. And you see that usually in retention. So
Mhm.
you feed people into the product that you have, and it doesn't stick somehow. And then after that, you start to figure out workarounds, and usually workarounds means like customer support, sales teams, and involvement of these people more into the process.
Hmm.
And then you have to grow in a headcount.
Usually, in order to like build something that people love, something that people get really excited to be using, to enjoy whatever you have built, you will need to care about your customers and their problems. And more important than caring, you actually need to get it. You need to understand their pain and to empathize and to actually know them. I just have to wonder, since your objective as a startup advisor is also to be challenging the startups that you're helping, how often is it that people don't really get it? They don't really understand the actual pain points. They think they do, but they don't exactly understand it.
It depends in a way, even from the beginning, on how they ended up with the product they want to build or with the startup they want to build. Some founders have an insight and they start from that insight. So
Mm-hmm.
they kind of in touch with the customer's needs, problems, pains, because in a way they are the customer.
Yep.
And I would say that could be the happy way of doing stuff. But there are also founders that just start out with from a more technological perspective of we could do something like this because
Mm-hmm.
technologically it's possible. And then it's a bit more challenging to point them towards the customer interview part and figuring out stuff about their customers because they are more of a builders
Mm-hmm.
than business people, I would say.
Hmm.
So they like to build. I even had this question at one of the startup programs that I was part of after like running some workshops with them. Like, if we do all this, when we will actually end up coding? I was like, I don't know. You might not end up coding anytime soon. There are people that like to build,
Yep.
and then you maybe just need somebody to partner up that to take on the other part,
Mm-hmm.
but you definitely can build a strategy on getting lucky on figuring out your customer needs
Mm-hmm.
because even if you think about the whole journey of the founder, they start, let's say they start with an insight and they somehow get their customers.
Yep.
They still just get like a percentage of that, and they are also a bit subjective because it's about them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you nail that, you come up with a solution good enough, and you start to have some traction with early adopters. But once you hit the next step,
Mm-hmm.
and more people start to get into your product, then you already have more different kind of customers that
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily understand and you don't necessarily know about them. And then you have to figure out who are those customers and how they use the product. And sometimes you might end up figuring out that how those customers or how customers use the product that you created is different than how you thought that they will use. I know that I worked on a couple of products where we actually launched features and nobody actually used them,
Oof.
but
Yeah.
we put out features because people wanted features, and actually marketing wise it worked. So it,
Mm-hmm.
like the we were getting clients, but the clients didn't use that part of the product. They were using the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that happens a lot. So, as I mentioned, you in a way you have to go back and check in with your customers and see who are your customers, what pains they have, what they are looking for in the product that you build, how they are using the product, what is working, what is not working for them, how they ended up using your product, in which context, and just to figure out all this information. And after that, it's a lot of information and insight that you can use in various stages of your product,
Mm-hmm.
because it is the same. If you want, all this information can be used in building and improving the product, but also in marketing, figuring out how to actually talk with your customers, what are the keywords, if you want, that they are using when they describe your product and when they describe their own pain and how they ended up with your product. So there are a lot of stuff that you can use just going back to your customers and understanding their their way of thinking about your product, their way of thinking about the problem and the context and the pain they have.
I think you put it really, really nicely in the way that you said startup people are usually builders, and that's great. And we can invest that time to build something, but that something might end up being a feature or even a whole product that people won't use. And when we do that, it's not just that we invested the cost, be it time, be it energy, be it money, but it's also the opportunity cost. What could we have done with that time? What could have built with that energy, and especially what how many people we could have helped, and actually customers we could have approached in the time that we didn't get to offer the solution that they really needed, which is why it's really interesting to your point, to partner up with somebody that also will offer, especially the business perspective at whatever stage you're at. You'll never be done with understanding your customer. That's just a process, and you continue to do that. And speaking of process and continuing to build, you have a very interesting approach of doing things at Durran. You have a method called the Durran product sprint. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what's the process like? How long does it take, and what does it involve?
Sure. It takes around 3 to 4 weeks, the whole
Oh,
thing.
wow. Okay.
Uh, it's not a lot. It might sound that it's a lot. It's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because in these 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, we
Mm-hmm.
go from mapping context, coming up with like actually understanding the problem, coming up with possible solutions, testing the solution with customers, and then moving towards design and preparing assets for development. So it's like you have 4 weeks in which you kind of figure out a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of this is the role of the process in itself. It's like the first week, it's mostly about mapping context.
Mm-hmm.
That means that we map whatever the founders know. And that's the part where we also try to challenge those assumptions. And we map assumptions as well to see how they see the product, what they understand about the customers. And once we are done with this first week, we have a bunch of assumptions and a bunch of information in one place, and then you can actually start to do the work, because you understand on if you want once you zoom out, you have an overview of that whole information, and it's in one place.
Yep.
What usually happens is that founders have pieces of this information in different places, and also when you are like 2 3 founders, let's say, or co-founders, they might have slightly different ideas of the same thing.
Yep.
That usually leads to a lot of discussions, and it might not be in the beginning, but at one point there were differences of who are our customers, why are those our customers and not the other ones, what we prioritize over what and why,
Mm-hmm.
and all these kind of discussions, which usually get the whole process longer and longer. So at this stage, the focus is to map all the insights in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, once we have that, we kind of have a somewhat better understanding of these basic concepts of how a flow would look like, who are the customers, who are the competitors, and also the assumptions they have and how much evidence they have towards those assumptions. And for those assumptions that they don't have evidence, they are important, are important for the business. Uh, we usually try to come up with some guidance or help, or at least pinpoint them on the direction of how to actually tackle these stuff. Some of those will be tackled in the second part of the workshop, but there are stuff that usually get back to them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And some are interviews, some are different tests. And for those that are interviews, in some cases, we might end up creating some scripts or at least bullet points of this is how you should talk with your customer, depending on if they are your customer or not, if they are a new customer or not, if they end up using your product or not.
Mm-hmm.
So we can try to segment them as well, because the information that you are looking for is different. If it's different if the customer is using your product, is different if they looked at your product but churned, or maybe used the product and churned,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't use the product anymore. But it's also as valuable as well, because it gives you a lot of information: who uses the product and why, who doesn't use the product and why. and how they think about this whole stuff. So this is kind of the first week. The second week is based on Google Ventures sprint process,
Hmm.
which is a almost 10 years old process. From what I know, there is also a book about it of how they run. They call it sprint.
Yeah.
Some call it the design sprint,
Yeah.
and it's a slightly modified Google sprint process. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
And here the whole focus is on moving people from the problem. And also this is the time when some other people join. So the first week it's mostly founders
Hmm.
and people that make decisions. It's usually around 2 to 3 people, and that's it. We
Hmm.
try to cap it as low as possible because you don't want to have long discussions.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
to map out the insights. You want to have everything in one place, have a good understanding of the challenge and what the founders want to solve, and that's it.
Hmm.
The second week, that's the place where the other people or team members can come in and contribute in their own way. So then we start this whole process with the first day of alignment. And it's a good time for founders to express some of the stuff that we discussed in the first week, but now they express it to the whole team. And in the meantime, they take notes, they write down different insights, and we will reuse all this stuff around. We will reuse all this information along the whole three workshops
Hmm.
that we have together. So the first day is alignment, as I mentioned, and then we move towards doing a bit of a research first. So once we have alignment, we understand the problem, we understand what we want to do, we understand a bit about the context. The next step is to do a bit of a research to see how others actually tackle something like this. And it can be others from the same industry, others from different industry. And especially, it can be especially helpful to get insights from companies that are solving similar challenges, but in different industries,
Hmm.
to see how they actually tackle something like this.
Hmm.
So you have all this inspiration stuff in one place. And then we move to create solutions. And that's the stuff that you also see here on the boards. It's like wireframes and sketches. So each team member has around 1 hour to create a concept of how they would actually solve this challenge.
Yep.
And you see all kind of ideas, and everybody just puts it on the board. So it's not like you present you present your sketch. It's like everybody creates a sketch, everybody puts it on a board, and then we just vote and ask questions, and that's it. It doesn't matter who created that sketch. It doesn't matter who presented it, how you present it. It's just the concept.
Hmm.
You just have the concept on the board. You can vote on different parts of it, and then you can ask questions, and that's it.
Hmm.
And once we have those concepts, we select one, and then we move towards something called storyboard. So we define how the solution should look like based on these concepts that we selected. And then we create a prototype, which is just a clickable dummy of this whole thing.
Yep.
We show it to 5 customers. We gather data and insights from those customers. Then we present this whole information back to the team, and then we select what's next.
Hmm.
So in most of the cases, because they want to design something, they want to create something. In most of the cases, like we have this prototype. These are the things that work. These are the things that didn't work. So our suggestions would be to create this, and we discuss regarding the suggestions.
And that sounds like quite a comprehensive process compared to what I had in mind at the very least. Because what I imagined was just the Google style design sprint. Oh, yeah, we're going to do that in 5 days and it's all cool. But no, that's a very comprehensive look at the whole thing.
Sometimes you need to help people in the beginning to frame the problem,
Oh, yeah.
and this is why there are some stuff in the beginning. Uh, like you could do a sprint, but you have to figure out if your challenge is actually solvable through a sprint, or if you need the sprint or not.
Hmm.
And this is why there are some of these workshops in the beginning of before actually starting the sprint.
Hmm.
And also there's a lot of valuable information that you won't get just from the sprint,
Hmm.
and we map all this before.
Hmm.
And basically you have all those assets as well. So you will, once we like hand over the project, you get all those personas defined, customer journey maps defined, whatever we created, you get all those. and it's definitely like you can use all that information from the next steps. Even if you didn't tackle everything that's on the board, you still have, I don't know, the customer journey maps, you still have all the assumptions, you
Yeah.
still have everything in one place. So you can move forward with that. And as I tell to founders, look, these are living documents, so we map them out at this moment. This is what you know, and this is how things look. But definitely they will evolve along the way. So at least you have something to start with. Because what happens a lot of times is they don't take time. And this is actually what one of the founders or product managers that I work with told me, like, look, we kind of know all the stuff, but we actually never sit down to put them in one place. So now we sat there, and like for how many workshops we had, we put everything down. Everything is in one place now. It's easy to get back to that information because it's there. It's not in somebody's head. It's not slightly different here and slightly different there. It's like this is all the information we have. This is everything. It's here.
And that's one of the most important things, not just from an uh, common understanding from the team, because once you've done that for real, you also have a common understanding on the current team. But that's a resource that's going to be leveraged for the rest of the lifetime of the product slash startup,
Mhm.
because what whoever you onboard now, you don't need to tell them in like 27 meetings about, oh yeah, but that's why we do this way. No, here's this resource, we worked on it a few weeks, this is
Mhm.
everything you need to know about why we are here, which is amazing. And one exceptional thing I heard in your process is the idea of assumptions and the evidence we have on those assumptions, which I think is really fascinating and really useful, especially not just for the startups at the very start of the road at the ideation stage, but also at the startups that are trying to grow. Because whenever we are in a position, we are working with assumptions and we have some evidence, but most likely we're not actually intentional about the assumptions that we have at the moment. And we don't operate with the conscious understanding that, hey, this is just an assumption. I'm not entirely sure that this is true. Totally
Yeah, you
amazing.
basically have to check how important is that assumption for your product and your
Oh, yeah.
business, and how much evidence you have, because it's not a 1-0, so you have or you don't have.
Yeah.
You might have some evidence, but it might be something that's not important, so either way it doesn't really care about.
Hmm.
You know what, if it's something that's critical for your customer, for your business, it's critical for your business, critical for your product, and you don't have evidence for that, it's you have to figure out something to do with it, because it might hit you back when you don't know about
Yeah.
it. And it's really hard to create a successful business that actually worked for like a long time. It's not just one hit.
Hmm.
It actually works for a long time, and it's totally based on assumptions without evidence.
Hmm.
Like, you're very lucky. Just show me the numbers of the next ticket and I just play them. So whatever.
Buy me a ticket as well, please.
Exactly.
But yeah, absolutely. It's not a 1 or 0. It's not a this is true or not. It's a spectrum.
Yeah, even how you test them, it depends. It's like you heard it from a customer, that how strong is that evidence? You heard it from somebody else, how strong of an evidence is that? They paid for this to get solved, and that's a stronger evidence. So
Hmm.
this is why, even on how you test it and what's good enough, it's up to you. But you, at least you have to know how much evidence you have, how important it is, so you're clear with yourself if it's a risk worth taking or not.
That's a fantastical insight, which is to be used by absolutely everybody at any stage of whatever it is that they're building. It's about assumptions and the evidence on assumptions. But also, I would just wanted to ask you, in this process, when you are actually building the solutions to show the customers, are you just showing them a mock-up, or are you actually building a low-code solution? Like, are you using Glide or Bubble to build something very quickly, just to like see how they actually work and what data they results into, or how does that look like?
For the customers that we test with,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just show Figma
Mm.
design linked together with hotspots, and that's
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Because we are on the call with them. So
Gotcha.
we give them a task
Hmm.
and we just want to see if they can go through the task or not. So it's definitely not one way to test everything. This is a way to test if people can go through the flow, if they understand the flow, if it makes sense or not, and also to collect some data on what they would like to have in some places, what's confusing for them. So you're there in the call with them and just watch them how they do their work.
Because the point is to observe the user experience, not necessarily the uh, builder process, whatever, how the application actually operates.
There are different ways to test different assumptions. This is one way to test flows. And in this process, we want to test if people could use the product. If for those that are very interested in risk and usually like risks and how to tackle risks in startups, Kagan says that there are basically four risks and that you have to tackle upfront, which is they are explained very well in Inspire. Value risk, if people would like to buy it or not, or if they would use it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's usability risks, if they could use it or couldn't
Mm-hmm.
use it, if they can go through the flow.
Mm-hmm.
Feasibility, this is much more like the technical part.
Mm-hmm.
If you can build it, if it's code, if it can work, if our team can actually build it or not.
Yep.
And business viability, this is if it's valuable for the business, if it's profitable, if it's worth actually pursuing. You want to collect the assumptions, and when you collect the assumptions, you kind of go on the same way. On what we use, the process we use for assumption mapping is from Strategizer. They have three: desirability, feasibility, and viability. So these are the three that are on the map on assumption mapping. And how we are doing is actually we tackle each section separately, and they just have to brain dump everything. So we talk about desirability. We want to see how we want to see all the assumptions regarding desirability, regarding how they think about the customer, if the customer uh, if they have any information regarding how the customer thinks about their product or this problem or blah, blah. So basically anything that they have regarding desirability, they just brain dump there. Mm-hmm. Then we have feasibility and we have viability. Mm-hmm. So we have all these risks or assumptions in one place, mm-hmm. and then we can start thinking about how we could tackle some. So with the sprint, you can tackle mostly stuff regarding the usability part. Mm-hmm. But you can ask also some other questions during the interview to see a bit at least regarding the desirability part. Mm-hmm. But feasibility, that's much more, usually it's more a technical part, and you want to see if they can build, if they have the knowledge in and stuff like that. And viability, that's more about the business and how the business operates and if they can make profit or not.
And obviously, yet again, that's not a one or a zero. This is a spectrum, and we have to address it. We have to address the situation appropriately, which obviously you are doing, judging by the sheer number of startups that have so far asked for your help. You are doing exceptionally well. But just keep in mind, it's always a spectrum, and we are collecting evidence to assess our assumptions / risks. But I think
you can't really get to like 100% sure on this. Absolutely. So it's like, this is why it's a spectrum.
Yeah. And also, I think there's something interesting that you said at the beginning regarding the number of people that participate at each stage. You said that in the very first phase, you need the founders and as few people as possible because you want it to go as smoothly as possible. In the later stages, are you involving all of the product team? Are you involving just the CTO/CPO/COO? Who is actually taking part, and how much of the startup should be taking part into the later stages of the process?
We at the second stage we try to keep it somewhere around 5 to 7 people, mm-hmm. and we are usually looking to those people in the company that can have additional value in what we are doing. So in a way, they are tied to the problem we want to solve. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, sometimes it's CTO or a developer. Obviously, most of the times we have at least one developer or on board.
Yep.
There might be a designer, there might be a product manager or CPO as well.
Gotcha.
Sometimes it's not the founder that we have the discussions in the beginning. If it's like a larger, like a scale up, let's put it that way. It might be the CPO or the VP of product or the product manager. The idea is in the beginning, you want to have those people that in a way or the other can kill the product or that part of the product. And you just want to map their own knowledge there. And in the second part, you want to involve those people that can have additional value in what we want to solve. And sometimes that means that you will go out of these roles, the CTO, the CPO, the whatever. You will go to maybe somebody from the marketing team, from somebody from the customer care or support team. So they are in a way in touch with the customer. They can have valuable input in how this will actually be shaped up and the solution created.
And obviously, this process works, and it works well for quite a lot of startups. And you have had quite a long experience so far with not just this process, but developing products in general. But you're not only in touch with the startups specifically that you work with, you're also in touch with the whole industry. You are putting a yearly UX startup report, which is a fantastic read. And it was insightful and quite fun to go through, actually. And I wanted to ask you, what are your key takeaways after having done that for a few years? What are your key takeaways when it comes to the user experience startup report?
It's just the second year now, but I would say that in a way, at least in a way, people that answer this year are a bit more mature on how they perceive this. And I don't know how much it shows the industry in Romania. I mean, most of the founders that most of the founders that answer this are from Romania.
Yep.
So because here I'm more active, here I have access to the founders as well. There are not a lot of changes. Most of them, at least in this year, one of the key aspects regarding the challenges they have is it's around making their platform easier to use, which makes sense. Like everybody wants to do that. The problem is that they usually don't know how to tackle this, or what to do next, or how to prioritize what to do next. This is one of the things. But it's kind of consistent with what we had last year as well. So these either building better products, either improving what they have, either moving faster. These are usually the challenges that they face and highlight in these kind of stuff.
Why would that be the main challenge to make the platform easier to use? Because I would imagine you just make it as easy to use as possible from the very beginning. You don't clutter it intentionally. So why is it simplicity of use, the user experience, so hard?
It's true that in the beginning you try not to clutter it, but while you start building and adding stuff, it gets a bit cluttered. And also the customer type might change along the years. So just think about it. When you launch something, it's usually the early adopters that try to use it, and they are more forgiving. They are okay. They kind of know how to get around stuff. And because they have the problem, they are okay with some stuff that doesn't work, some stuff that you don't find, and you have to work around with whatever. Now, when other people start to join, they are less forgiving about this stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to improve in order to retain them, because otherwise they will churn and they will just go away. And once they churn, it's really hard to get them back. And this is why they want to make it easier to use, because this easier to use actually comes with other stuff as well. As I mentioned, when something doesn't work, they reach out to the customer care or support or email you or whatever, or churn. Hopefully that's the last thing they do. And then you have that thing to actually manage. What you do with those tickets, how do you answer them, who will answer them, how much you can answer. And after that, people start to ask for features, how you deal with those features, how you integrate them in the flow, and things like that. So in a way or the other, it gets more cluttered, but
Hmm.
also the customer type might change slightly from time to time, and they are not that forgiven anymore because they are not the early adopters. They are more of the rest that are coming.
Hmm. And I think the mantra that we usually reserve for startups, move fast and break things, it's not as much of a cliche saying as it is a requirement, because whatever you do from week to week, from month to month, from year to year, things will change. Regardless of whether you want them to or not, things will change. And we have to realize that whenever things change, we have built everything that we have built and we're continuing to build on some assumptions. And those assumptions need to be reassessed and to get new evidence to compare those assumptions to the current reality that we are facing. Because we might be building something right for what we believe is right, but we just might be building on the wrong assumptions, which is one really interesting takeaway that I get from this whole conversation. And speaking from about this conversation, this has been really, really cool to learn from you and from your experience, and it's been an absolutely fascinating talk. Thank you so much, Daniel. But on this show, we have a tradition. Before I let you go, I have to ask you if you could remove just one boundary from your ecosystem, no questions asked, you could do it, but you could only remove one boundary. Which one will it be and why?
Oh, that's a tough question.
It always is, and it always gets the most interesting of answers.
You necessarily have to remove it. I would add boundaries, but
Mm. Okay, I'm
that's
listening.
different.
That's a,
Different
that's
perspective.
the first addition that I ever heard. I'm listening.
Usually people think about like when you think about founders, they usually want like resources, definitely. It's like they want more developers, they want more money, they want more of whatever. That's usually what you need. And if you can grant one of their wishes, it would be founding. They would like to get somebody to invest in them. That's like most of the times what you hear. Yeah, most of the times. But I have like I was just thinking about this for some days, and
Hmm.
I have to put it somewhere at one point, and I guess this might be that first way, first time to put it out. I have a special, if you want, admiration for founders that are bootstrapping
Hmm.
because they are thinking like they actually have to build a viable business from day one.
Yep.
It's not like you can do whatever and somebody will invest in you and then you will just burn that money to get another round and burn that money to get another round. It has to be a viable business. And if you think about what happened in the like last year when the whole tech industry started to like implode in a way, uh, and somehow it was in the same sequence of VCs and investors uh, putting out less money for founders, and most of them were, oh, this kind of sucks now because we can't do what blah 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 whatever we want. But some of us was like, dude, that's actually an interesting part. Like, so in a way, they will clear out those that uh, wouldn't wanted to create something for that for real. They actually would, whatever happens, they want to do it. It's whatever. If they get funded, it's good. If they don't get funded, they find a way to do it. So, and now founders won't like me, but come on, this is like now a lot of people will hate me. But I guess it would be interesting if they would figure out a way in the beginning to build a viable business instead of just relying straight day one founding.
Hmm. I think what you just said does hit quite a sensible note for for a lot of founders, but it is something that we do need to address in this space of startups in general, because we have this habit of scale at of all costs, but usually the actual business side of that scaling doesn't come at the pace that we would need it to.
Depends on what you,
Yeah.
yeah, it really depends on what you want to scale, I would say. It's like if you don't have money and you want to scale, then what you have that you want to scale, it's like if you think about it, like I'm not an investor, so I might be biased, and that's fair. So whatever, but this is still my opinion. I started to read a bit about like investors when they invest and what they are looking for, and in a way they are looking for something that shows a bit of attraction, like shows a bit of attraction, not attraction. Whatever, either way it works. And if you don't have anything that has traction and you're stagnant in a way, then you want founding. Why you want founding for? Because it's not like something started to grow and now you need money to actually burn that money to like 10x or 3x or whatever. It's like you're still stagnant. It's just you will get money, but what will happen? You onboard 2 more clients tops, and that's not like, it's not something valuable. So yeah, I don't know if this is good or bad.
It is an interesting point that I've never heard so far in the many episodes. So far, nobody has come to suggest that maybe we should actually focus on the business aspect of the business of the startup that we're building, and to make it sustainable from day 0 or day 1, or to bootstrap it from the very beginning.
At least you have to be very clear from the beginning what's your game, I would say. So if it's bootstrapping, you will act in a way. If it's you go for founding, you will act in a different way, and you have to be clear about that.
Absolutely, because those are very different games, and you have to play by different sets of rules.
But still, special place in my heart for those that are bootstrapping.
Likewise, it is especially interesting to see people dedicate not just their time and energy, but also their personal resources, their personal hopes and dreams into this thing, and not asking for outside help, but rather just offering value in order to be quote unquote helped back by their clients, which is absolutely phenomenal. And you know what else is absolutely phenomenal? This conversation. You have been an amazing guest, and this has been an exceptional conversation with lots of insights to take home, and quite a lot of new things which we have not yet covered. With that being said, Daniel, where would you like to send people?
Oh, they can find me on LinkedIn. So if they want to message me, LinkedIn is the easiest way. And definitely the website, but I would say LinkedIn is the best one. So if you are looking for Daniel Andor, you can find it on LinkedIn quite easily. It's one in Timisoara, from what I know.
And we will have all of that information down, linked below. And with that being said, I thank you so very much for being here, and I thank you for listening. Szia, Onesia. Bye.
You've been listening to the Audacious Ecosystem, the show where we learn together what it takes to make an ecosystem great from the leaders in the organizations around us.